Imagine standing outside at high noon. The thermometer hits 43 degrees Celsius, that is over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground beneath your feet is hot enough to cook an egg. There is no air conditioning, no ice, and no electricity. In fact, refrigeration won't exist for another 3,000 years. Now imagine you aren't just sitting in the shade. You are about to haul heavy limestone blocks for the next 8 hours. And here's the wild part. You are totally fine with it. It's just a normal Wednesday. When we think of ancient Egypt, our minds instantly jump to giant stone pyramids, golden pharaoh masks, and mysterious mummies. But we completely ignore the most impressive achievement of their entire civilization. Because the real achievement was simpler and harder to explain. How do you keep an entire civilization functioning in lethal heat when your most advanced technology is river mud? The answer wasn't one invention. It was a system built from biology, architecture, clothing, food, and drink, all locked together so tightly that removing any single piece would have collapsed the rest. That system starts with the human body and one critical vulnerability. Your skin contains somewhere between 2 and 4 million sweat glands, making humans the most prolific sweaters in the animal kingdom. Dogs pant. Elephants flap their ears. Humans push water through their skin, and as that moisture evaporates, it pulls heat directly off the body. It works remarkably well in dry air, but it runs on a consumable resource, fluid. In the Egyptian climate, a laborer could lose several liters of water through sweat in a single afternoon. Lose just 2% of your body weight in fluid and your concentration drops sharply. At 5%, your organs are under strain. At 10%, your body starts shutting down, often while you are too confused to realize what is happening. There's a second problem most people overlook. Sweat carries sodium. If you drink only plain water to replace what you lost, you dilute your body's internal chemistry. Your nervous system misfires. This condition, called hyponatremia, can knock a person unconscious just as fast as dehydration itself. So survival in the Egyptian desert came down to 3 rules: maximize shade and airflow, constantly replace lost fluid, and rapidly replenish salt. The Egyptians never wrote those rules in a textbook, but over thousands of years of trial and error, every detail of their daily life was organized around them. The first layer of the system was shelter. A modern house built from thin metal or wood in a desert becomes an oven within minutes. The Egyptians took the opposite approach, using the most available material they had: Nile River mud mixed with straw, pressed into bricks, and baked hard in the sun. Mud brick has a property called high thermal mass. A thick mud brick wall doesn't simply block heat, it slows it down. When the morning sun hits the outside of a house, the thermal energy takes hours to crawl through the dense wall. The peak heat of mid-afternoon doesn't reach the interior until around midnight. By then, the desert sky has gone dark and temperatures have dropped dramatically. The stored heat radiates inward right when the family actually needs warmth. Meanwhile, the cool air absorbed during the night reaches the interior around noon the following day. Without a single moving part, a mud brick house flips the desert's massive temperature swing completely out of phase with human needs. The hottest hours outside become the coolest hours inside, and the other way around. The design went further. In worker villages like Deir el-Medina, homes were packed tightly along narrow streets, so buildings shaded each other throughout the day. Windows were cut small and placed near the ceiling, letting hot air escape upward. Exterior walls were painted white to reflect solar radiation. And when darkness fell, the entire family moved their beds to the flat rooftop to sleep in the open air. Heavy walls handled the daily heat cycle, but Egyptian builders also invented a way to actively move cooled air through a home. The device was called a malkaf, or wind catcher. Archaeological evidence shows these structures on residential roofs dating back to at least the 19th dynasty, around 1300 BCE. They were hooded scoops pointed toward the prevailing wind. The wind hit the scoop, dropped down a vertical shaft, and flushed fresh air directly into the living space below. As cool air entered, hot air was pushed out through upper vents on the opposite wall, creating a continuous draft powered entirely by natural wind pressure and thermal buoyancy. Inside the shaft, homeowners placed porous, unglazed clay pots filled with water. As the dry wind passed over the damp clay, moisture seeped through and evaporated, pulling heat energy out of the incoming air. The air arriving in the living room was not just moving. It was noticeably cooler than the air outside. This is the exact operating principle behind a modern evaporative cooler, built entirely from mud, clay, water, and wind. The system extended to what people wore. If you had to work outside in 40 degrees Celsius heat today, your instinct would probably be to strip down to as little clothing as possible. But look at what ancient Egyptians actually wore: long tunics, wrapped skirts, head covers, and robes. The reason is counterintuitive. Direct sunlight hitting bare skin heats the body faster than sweat can cool it. Loose, white clothing acts as a portable shade structure. It reflects solar radiation away while creating a chimney effect underneath the fabric. As the wearer moves, air rises past the skin and carries heat with it. The material they chose was linen, woven from locally grown flax. Linen fibers are naturally hollow, highly breathable, and pull moisture away from the skin so it can evaporate into the surrounding air. Cotton, by comparison, holds water and turns heavy. Wool traps heat. Linen was the only practical fabric for sustained desert labor. Even the well-known Egyptian habit of shaving their heads and wearing wigs had a thermal function. A thick mass of natural hair traps body heat and attracts parasites. A woven wig provided shade over the scalp with an insulating air gap underneath, and it could be removed the moment a person stepped indoors. Architecture and clothing controlled how much heat reached the body, but none of it mattered without solving the fluid equation. Egyptian laborers needed to drink multiple liters of liquid every day just to stay alive. The Nile was right there, but drinking from it directly was a serious gamble. The water carried silt, agricultural runoff, and parasites, including the flatworm that causes schistosomiasis. So Egyptians drank beer. Enormous quantities of it. Ancient Egyptian beer was nothing like a modern lager. It was a thick, warm, nutritious liquid made from fermented barley or emmer wheat. It was low in alcohol, rich in B vitamins from active yeast, and calorie-dense enough to function as a meal on its own. Because the brewing process involved boiling the grain mash and allowing yeast to ferment, the finished drink was naturally sanitized, far safer than untreated river water. This beer was so essential to daily survival that it became the foundation of the economy. Workers at Deir el-Medina, the village that housed the craftsmen who built the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, were paid directly in daily rations of bread and beer. Around 1157 BCE, during the 29th year of Ramesses III's reign, those rations arrived weeks late. The workers did not simply complain. They set down their tools and walked off the job site. The scribe Amenacht recorded the event on papyrus, making it the earliest documented labor strike in human history. In a climate that could kill a dehydrated person in hours, withholding the beer supply was not an administrative inconvenience. It was a threat to their survival. To balance all that liquid, the Egyptian diet was loaded with sodium and potassium. Salted dried fish, coarse bread, garlic, onions, and potassium-rich dates were daily staples. Without any formal understanding of electrolyte chemistry, their food culture replaced exactly what sweat took away. Every piece of this system, the mud brick walls, the wind catchers, the linen clothing, the beer, the salted food, worked because the other pieces existed alongside it. Remove the beer and workers collapse from dehydration. Remove the salt and the beer causes hyponatremia. Remove the mud brick and no amount of clothing saves a family sleeping in an oven. Remove the clothing and outdoor labor becomes impossible regardless of what people eat or drink. There is one more layer, and it is the most unexpected. The desert itself was the final component of the system. The vast, waterless sands stretching hundreds of miles to the east and west acted as natural barriers. Foreign armies could not cross them. Supply lines could not survive them. While empires in Mesopotamia were invaded and overthrown repeatedly, Egypt remained protected behind walls of heat and sand for nearly 3 millennia. The extreme dryness also preserved everything it touched. In humid climates, wood, papyrus, linen, and organic tissue decompose within decades. But Egypt's bone-dry sand desiccated objects so completely that delicate scrolls, royal tombs, and human remains survived for thousands of years. The Egyptians even took a practical lesson from this natural process, using natron, a dry mineral salt found in desert deposits, to develop their famous mummification techniques. The environment that threatened to kill them every afternoon also protected their borders and preserved their history longer than any other ancient civilization. We tend to think of desert survival as a battle against nature. The Egyptians turned it into a partnership. Their architecture didn't fight the heat. It redirected it. Their clothing didn't resist the sun. It worked with airflow. Their food and drink didn't just taste good. They kept the biological cooling system running. 3,000 years ago, an Egyptian family sat inside a thick mud brick home while a clay-lined shaft overhead pulled a breeze through a damp pot and filled the room with cooled air. No electricity, no moving parts, no maintenance, no emissions. Today, architects are returning to pharaonic tomb paintings to study how the Malkaf worked, trying to design modern buildings that can do the same thing. It turns out that the oldest engineering in the room might still be the smartest.